Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be looking at the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft class, revisiting it. Where did
20.
Brandon Beane go? 2022, excuse me. Where did Brandon Beane go right? Where did he go wrong? What players from said draft will be a part of the Buffalo Bills' future beyond the first contract? All that and more. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. This podcast, can't speak today, apparently, is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. Dave, today we're going to be revisiting the 2022 Buffalo Bills draft class. And one of the reasons why we're sort of doing this exercise is Brandon Beane has spoken a number of times to the media, sort of done the rounds the past couple of weeks. And it seems like every single person, whether it's Robert Mays or it's Chris Long, who is interviewing Brandon Beane, has asked him the same exact question. What is this new version of the Buffalo Bills going to look like? The next iteration, I think, is the word that a lot of people use of the Buffalo Bills. And a large part of this new iteration of the Buffalo Bills is a good chunk, almost all of this 2022 draft class.
It really is, because you think about how this team is now evolving and guys that were part of sort of the rookie contract era window of Josh Allen, right? Of Josh Allen's rookie contract. You had guys like Tre'Davious White, who were obviously the first pick of the sort of McDermott era. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Don't know what Micah Hyde's going to do as of right now. He's not on the team. You have other guys like Stephon Diggs now who are not a part of this team. And the team really was kind of due, I guess I would say, for a transition, right? And I think it is a transition in a new iteration. It's not a rebuild, and a lot of people just use that term loosely, and that's not really what it is. It's an evolution, I think, of the roster and the core. A lot of the core talent is still there, and a lot of that core talent now coming from this 2022 draft class.
And it's kind of surprising too, because the Buffalo Bills kind of struck out, maybe not struck out, but maybe like it's like a 3-1 count right now with Kaiir Elam. So let's take a look at that first round pick. In the first round, we have Kaiir Elam. He played in 20 of 38 games, including the playoffs. He's had some injury issues, but he's also been healthy and active, starting only 9 games in his time here. Fun fact, he has as many postseason interceptions as he does regular season interceptions, with 2. The 3 players taken directly after Kaiir Elam, Tyler Smith, Tyler Linderbaum, Jermaine Johnson, they've all made a Pro Bowl. And we even traded a 4th round pick to move up to that spot to get Kaiir Elam. Clearly, the Buffalo Bills reached for need. And right now, this is one of the more disappointing picks of this draft class.
It is, and I mean, obviously, hindsight's 2020. You go back and you can look at any draft class and see when players are picked after others, like the infamous, Gronk pick after Terrell Troop. Like we already know, like there's been stuff like that that's happened in the Bills' past. But at the end of the day, the Bills needed a corner that year. Did Brandon Beane get a little bit, flustered with the fact that there's those corners going, McDuffie notably to the Chiefs right before? A couple picks before the Bills there, getting Elam, the Bills really did need a corner. Betting on the traits, likely. I think the interviews clearly go a long way in the Bills' war room and in the Bills' brass as part of their decision making. And we've seen that again from what it looks to be like this year with Keon Coleman and his interview, and how the Embedded series really shone a light on the interview process with Keon Coleman during the pre-draft, and that pre-draft interview process with Kaiir Elam seems to have also played a factor in the Bills going after him, missing out maybe on a guy like McDuffie, but then landing a guy like Kaiir Elam. The book is not closed on him yet,
Yeah.
right? The book is not closed on him yet. He's had some flashes, we'll say, and he did have the big interception against the Steelers in the playoff game last year. We know that. And there is still hope for him, right? There is still hope for him. I think he's approaching things the right way. He is going to have a chance, by all accounts, to make a pretty good contribution this year. And this is ultimately probably going to decide his fate for beyond his rookie contract is how he plays this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing some significant changes to the Buffalo Bills defensive staff. Bobby Babich is now the defensive coordinator, still to be seen whether he'll be calling the plays or not. Jamil Adai, a new cornerbacks coach. Rasul Douglas is on an expiring deal, and right now, Kaiir Elam is the number 3 corner on the depth chart. To me, that means he's going to play, and he's probably going to start at some point this year, because the way the Buffalo Bills secondary has had injury luck the last couple of seasons, if that continues, there's no way Benford and Douglas are getting through an entire season, which means Kaiir Elam's going to play a little bit, right? And if he can step in and take advantage of those opportunities with Rasul Douglas on that expiring deal, as I just mentioned, there is a legitimate opportunity for Kaiir Elam to be a starting corner opposite Christian Benford in 2025. So like I said, it's not exactly a strikeout, but right now, Kaiir Elam is down 3-1 in the count or 3-0 in the count, and he's going to need to battle back, but the opportunity is there for him to do so. And I honestly feel bad for him a little bit, because the Bills clearly drafted him because he had all the athletic traits in the world and he wowed them at the combine. So those two things, I think, are what sold the Buffalo Bills. But I think the Bills have failed Kaiir Elam more than Kaiir Elam has failed the Buffalo Bills. He's had his issues. He's been very grabby, but the Bills knew that he was more of a man-to-man guy when he came here. And he's even this offseason in OTAs talked with Teron Johnson about learning how to play smaller. And he's a humble guy and he's saying all the right things. But dude, you took a man-to-man physical aggressive corner and then asked him to play. You're asking him to play smaller, to play small. Like, you're doing the exact opposite of what he sort of built to do. So yes, he could have played better, but like, I think the Bills failed Kaiir Elam more than Kaiir Elam has failed the Bills thus far.
I don't think you're off base with that take, to be honest. I mean, situation matters. We talk about this all the time when it comes to where players get drafted is, as if not more important than the talents they're bringing to that team in some cases, right? The situation matters. And, if Kaiir Elam was drafted to a different team that maybe played a little bit more man coverage, schematically, like, maybe he would have flourished more.
Yeah.
The Bills probably, had the mindset of, hey, we could use a guy with these athletic traits. Maybe we would want to play a little bit more, man style coverage in some certain situations, but it didn't really materialize in that way to the extent that we thought it would. And some of that's on Kaiir Elam, maybe not showing that, but also that's the Bills and like them making a decision on trying to fit something into a scheme where really in the past, and this goes back to even with Leslie Frazier, and maybe this will be different with Babich now, where each guy really, it was assignment based, 111th. It wasn't a whole lot of exotic sort of, mixing and matching. It was like you're doing your job. And so that job now is different than what he's used to. So I understand where you're coming from with that opinion. And I think both sides have obviously some fault. And because of that, it's just exacerbated the whole overall situation with maybe Kaiir Elam not playing as good as we would have hoped. And the Bills also putting him in a situation that's been more difficult has just compounded the whole perception around it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the cornerbacks taken after Kaiir Elam, because the Buffalo, like the Bills traded up a 4th round pick up to get him when they could have stayed where they were. And I'll take the nickel corners out, like Roger McCreary and Alante Taylor. They could have stayed where they were, and Kyler Gordon would have been there. And Kyler Gordon has been okay in Chicago, and they would have still had that 4th round pick. And who knows what they would have done with that 4th round pick? Probably taking Khalil Shakir. Andrew Booth Jr. hasn't worked out. Turns out there was some medical stuff with him that slipped him in the draft. Cam Taylor Britt, again, more of like man-to-man type of guy, but Martin Emerson, who went in the third round, has had a pretty good career in Cleveland. So not exactly a murderer's row of cornerbacks were taken after Kaiir Elam. So you can't get too upset with the Buffalo Bills, but the fact that they traded up for him, I think leads a lot to the disappointment as well, when they could have just stayed where they were, taking Kyler Gordon and saved that 4th round pick.
Yeah, and I know you were a big Kyler Gordon fan that year. I think
Yep.
he might have been your no matter what corner that year, if I'm not
that
mistaken.
that he was.
And yeah, we were big Kyler Gordon fans on the Air Raid Hour, and that was that one definitely. I think there was a little question of like, was he going to be inside? Was he going to play
Yeah.
outside? And I mean, the Bears have got what looks to be a good, young, promising cornerstone to their defense as well. Man, I like the Bears roster a lot.
The rest of the draft outside a little asterisk in the 6th round, a lot better for the Buffalo Bills. Let's go now to round number 2, where the Buffalo Bills traded back a couple of times and then selected James Cook, the running back out of Georgia. In 2022, James Cook carried the ball 237 times for 1,122 yards. That's a 4.7 yards per carry average. On a lighter workload this rookie season, he averaged 5.7 yards per carry. He had 2 touchdowns rushing in 2022, and he also added 44 catches for 444 yards and 4 touchdowns. He really started to thrive once Joe Brady became the play caller for the Buffalo Bills. He is an impactful, game-changing, explosive, big playback in both the run and the pass game. You can't ask for more, especially on a rookie cost-controlled contract, than you're getting from James Cook, our 2nd round pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, and I love the tweet you put out earlier about him being 6th in all-purpose yards in the entire NFL in 2023. The only guys ahead of him: Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, and Puka Nacua. So really good company, or those are the only guys above James Cook from an all-purpose yard standpoint. This is going to be a very interesting dynamic. I think if James Cook puts up a really strong season again in 2024, even if that season mirrors what he did in 2023, which by the way was a Pro Bowl season, as you mentioned, the Bills are going to have to start thinking about, like, do we want this guy around beyond his rookie deal, which obviously there is another year, right? He's got 2025 as well. But if he puts another really strong season together, would the Bills be willing to, a year before he goes into a contract year, give him an extra year, maybe a 2-year extension? I don't know if the Bills are going to be willing to do that. They've been so willing to churn and burn their running backs, letting Devin Singletary go, but they haven't had a guy since LaShawn McCoy, I would say, that has been as talented as James Cook, and he is going to be an enormously important cog in this machine in 2024. And look, the trading back, it's like almost it kind of helps ease the pain of the trading up for Kaiir Elam. The fact that you were able to trade back a couple times and still get this guy, man, I think you start, like you said, looking at this draft after the 1st round, and you home run with James Cook.
You mentioned the future beyond 2025. I can envision, right? Like, if you're the Buffalo Bills and, he has a Christian McCaffrey type of impact in 2024, maybe you can give him a 3-year extension and pay him, because you're not paying any wide receivers, right? Keon Coleman's contract won't be up for 3 years, and you can get him. He's going to be 25 in September, which would make him, he's going to be 25 in September, which would make him 26 in 2025, 27 in 2026, 28 in 2027. So if you give him a 3-year maybe extension after next season, you're bringing him up into his like year 28, 29, before he's 30. And then you can let him go and have to pay a guy like Keon if Keon hits. But I think Ray Davis could play a part in that as well. If Ray Davis looks really good as the 1B, you can find, you can replace a guy like James Cook maybe in the aggregate. There was a guy in the draft this year like Will Shipley. Like, so if you feel like Ray Davis can take the charge in the backfield, you can add a pass catching back like a Will Shipley, or you can usually find guys on the street, the JD McKissick types, to sort of play a James Cook type of role in the passing game. So the Bills can augment and they can sort of replace in the aggregate. But if he blows up again this year and improves upon what he did last year, I would pay him a premium up until he's 28 years old. I would give him a 3-year extension. I would be all for that because I really do believe that once this season comes to a conclusion, when we look back on the 2024 season, we're going to look back as the three most impactful players on the Bills offense outside of Josh Allen and outside the offensive line. I think we're going to be focusing on just the skill position players. I think it's going to be Dalton Kincaid. I think it's going to be Curtis Samuel. And I think James Cook will be the third guy on that list that we talk about. Like, whoa, those are the three go-to guys in this offense. I love Khalil Shakir. I love Keon Coleman. I think there'll be auxiliary type of players behind this big three, at least in 2024.
I want to ask you a question about James Cook and unprompted, because I want to get your kind of like off the cuff take on this. Derrick Henry's aging. We know he's on Baltimore. Fine. We'll see what he does kind of in the twilight years, I'll call it, of his sort of prime. Where do you put, like, tier wise, where does James Cook fall for you in the list of like NFL running back tiers? You obviously have McCaffrey. He's kind of in a tier of his own. Derrick Henry was probably in a tier like that a couple years ago, probably not anymore. Like, you have up and coming guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall. You have Kyron Williams, who's an up and coming guy. Yeah. You have Mostert, who's an older guy, but had the sort of season that he had. Then you have other guys that are kind of like in new situations or new coaches. Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, like Kenneth Walker's had been very good. Like, where is James Cook for you in sort of the landscape of the top running backs in the NFL?
I would probably put him in either tier 2, like not looking at all the running backs and not putting too much thought into it. Either a tier 2 or a tier 3. I mean, if you had to put a gun to my head and say Jahmyr Gibbs or James Cook, I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, I think he's going to have the higher ceiling of those two players, especially with the offense that he's in. But I would stack James Cook up against like the Tony Pollards of the world. And we just saw Tony Pollard get 3 years, $21 million, which is a 7.25 AAV. If you can get James Cook for $8 million a year in 2026, 2027, right? Like up until he's age 28, 29, I would do that in a heartbeat. Now, if it was double digit millions, again, this is a conversation that we're having in the summer of 2024. If he goes out and has a Christian McCaffrey like impact, I might be giving you a different answer next summer. But right now, $8 million a year, if he has another season like this one, I would do that in a heartbeat.
I agree.
And keep him here until he's around age 30, and then, burn and churn from there. But yeah, I'm totally on board with the second contract for James Cook within reason. And if he has an even more explosive 2024, even more explosive 2025, I might be game for an extension even beyond what many would probably consider reasonable now, and maybe even consider some of those double digits. But anything can happen, right? Like at any time, an injury could happen that could completely change what we're talking about. Like, what if he has a nagging hamstring issue all of 2024? Yep. Knock on wood. Like, we're having a different conversation next offseason about James Cook and his future with the Buffalo Bills. So a lot of things that can happen, but right now, sitting here, summer of 2024, I would definitely be game for giving him a second contract. I think it's a home run hit for Brandon Beane, even if he just replicates what he does the next couple of years and leaves after his first contract. Great use, I think, of a second round pick there by Brandon Beane, which leads us now to the third round. And we have Terrel Bernard, the pick that left us sort of speechless on draft night, not because we didn't like the player, but we didn't see the vision, but we see the vision now. And in 2022, Terrel Bernard, 143 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits, 5 pass defense, 3 interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries. He is a playmaker at middle linebacker. He wears the green dot. He's likely going to be a 2024 captain. I mean, he was featured pretty heavily on a Bills Embedded with Khalil Shakir. He's one of those guys that's, with all these other guys leaving, like Poyer and Hyde and Mitch Morse, I think he's going to really ascend into a leadership role in 2024. And I believe I said in 2022 with his statistics, it was 2023. I think he's really going to ascend into a leadership role. So Terrel Bernard, I think is going to be a cornerstone piece for this team going into the future.
It's funny, man, how much things can change in just not even 2 years, right? I mean, we're talking on draft night, like Bills draft Terrel Bernard. We were thinking like, well, we really wanted a guard at that time. And we were like, okay, Terrel Bernard, what does he bring to the table? Really good blitzing linebacker. But in a lot of minds and in our minds, we were probably trying to come up with a replacement for Tremaine Edmonds in the future. And he didn't fit the archetype of a Tremaine Edmonds. Now, no one really does. Tremaine Edmonds is a bit of a unicorn athletically, but this was also during Leslie Frazier's tenure here too. So things changed as well, coaching staff wise. That to me is not a coincidence with the absolute just ascension of Terrel Bernard and sort of Sean McDermott
Mhm.
taking the reins of that defense over, clearly having that vision for him. Now, I don't think anyone would have expected, I don't even think the coaching staff or Brandon Beane would have expected him to play as well as he did. I mean, that was an all pro caliber season last year. And I will say it again, and we'll say it probably many times more in the summer. If he's on the field in that Chiefs playoff game, we win that game, I think.
Mhm.
I want to see him in Milano for a full season together at that level. He could be an all pro. The Bills could have potentially 2 all pro linebackers there. And the ceiling we saw from Terrel Bernard last year is like an all pro caliber Mike
Mhm.
linebacker at his size doing these things all over the field. It's just exceeded all expectations, right? And so even if you don't like the Kaiir Elam pick in round 1, day 1 and 2 for the Bills in 2022, talking about James Cook in round 2, Terrell Bernard in round 3,
Mhm.
I mean, that makes this class look really, really good. And I am really excited to see Terrell Bernard on the field with Matt Milano in 2024.
Yeah, and not to put the cart sort of ahead of the horse here, because you mentioned, Milano and Bernard in the field at the same time. You're looking at an opportunity here to get them on the field in 2024 and 2025, like 2 full seasons together, being maybe 2 of the better linebackers in football. If Milano can come back from that fractured leg, that'll be really enticing. But if Bernard continues this ascension and he starts to get those all pro nods like Matt Milano, he starts to get that recognition. There are some legitimate, like ESPN, Fox Sports, there are some analysts of football who I guarantee you don't know Terrell Bernard is the Bills starting middle linebacker. That's crazy to me. And I think that will change over the
Yep.
next couple of years the way it did with Matt Milano, because no one knew who Matt Milano was. No, Stephen A. Smith couldn't name Matt Milano a couple of years ago. He certainly probably could now if pressed and asked about it. So as Bernard starts to get that recognition, Roquan Smith just got a major deal. 5 years, $100 million, 22.5 million signing bonus, 60 million guaranteed, 20 million AAV. Right now, the Bills are in a very unfortunate circumstance where Terrell Bernard's contract is up after 2025, and Matt Milano is still under contract with a $16 million cap hit with an $11 million dead cap in 2026. So if the Bills are going to extend Terrell Bernard, maybe they have to give him some kind of extension where he has a lower cap number in his first season of his extension, like in 2026, to make up for the fact that Matt Milano is making $16 million, and then give him the bank in the years preceding that and hope that he can, in his years 27, 28, 29, 30, contribute in the way Matt Milano did. And maybe another guy comes up the pipeline like a Dorian Williams to fill that Matt Milano spot in 2027. But the Bills should feel comfortable knowing, barring injury, which is something important to note because Matt Milano has been hurt and Terrell Bernard has been hurt throughout his college and pro career. Barring injury, the Bills are really set at linebacker for the next 2 years. And there is someone to take the mantle from Matt Milano once he sort of ages out. So the Bills should feel really comfortable because even though it's a non-premium position, it's a very important position to this defense.
It really is. And you start to think about where are they going to start to have to invest dollars in extensions on the defense. By that time, Von Miller, there's a chance that's cleared, right? Or at least he's
Mhm.
not on the team at that point. They didn't extend Rasul Douglas, so there's not any really new money going into that position, at least right now. You have Christian Benford still on his rookie year, and we're going to get to him later. I mean, you start to think about who you're going to invest in this defense. You already gave AJ Epinesa a couple-year contract. It comes down, I think, to a couple people here, right? You're talking about guys like Terrel Bernard, and you're talking about Greg Rousseau, right? Those are like the kind of two guys that you have to kind of decide in not short order, but like Rousseau, you have to decide after this
Mhm.
year, and then Bernard probably the year after. So, like for all those people who didn't want to pay Tremaine Edmonds what he got, like Terrell Bernard is angling for a contract that's looking like it's probably going to be more for that if he puts up
Mhm.
another season like he did last year.
All right. Before we get to the Buffalo Bills' 5th round selection from 2022, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, on to round number 5, Dave. And in round number 5, the Buffalo Bills traded up a little bit to get back up into the 5th round. And with that selection, they took the wide receiver out of Boise State, fan favorite Khalil Shakir. He was finally able last season to break through, become the primary slot option for the Buffalo Bills with Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis on the outside. He was quite literally the most efficient wide receiver in football last year. This is crazy statistics. 39 catches on 45 targets for 611 yards. That's 15.7 per, and 2 touchdowns. Everyone's bullish on Khalil Shakir, I think, in a lot of very similar ways to the way they were bullish on Gabriel Davis after that 4 touchdown game in the AFC Championship or in the AFC divisional game against the Chiefs. So I would say slow your roll on Khalil Shakir a little bit. But even if I'm asking you to slow your roll, and I'm going to catch flack for saying that, even if he's a 75 to 80 target guy or a 65 to 75 catch guy, and even if he's just a solid number 3 receiver in the 5th round, that is such immense value and great value. So if Khalil Shakir, even if he just replicates what he did in 2022, in 2020, or excuse me, in 2023 and 2024 and 2025, even if he just replicates those 2 things, this is still a home run draft pick for the Buffalo Bills and Brandon Beane.
Yeah, and look, I think, I mean, even we were probably maybe a little, a little too quick to dismiss his potential that he could have given to this team last year. But I think now the door's wide open for him, right? Because as Joe Brady said, in his press conference, the ball's going to be spread around quite a bit, right? And Khalil Shakir is going to be one of those targets. 611 yards last year on just the 39 catches you mentioned. So 611 yards, what is that going to kind of approximate to with the uptick in targets that we certainly expect him to get, right? I mean, 45 targets last year. We certainly expect that to be higher this year, but you also have a lot of new faces as well, as far as Keon Coleman. You're going to try to get him worked in the offense. You expect an upkick in Dalton Kincaid's target count. You obviously expect to feature Curtis Samuel, what James Cook in the passing game. Dawson Knox is still here. So I don't necessarily see an automatic just like doubling, let's say, of production from Khalil Shakir. I think that might be unrealistic, but I think you could see a pretty nice uptick.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'll be looking for is like that continued efficiency, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
He is super efficient. Even if you just uptick slightly his target, his target share. If you keep that efficiency, that's going to be critical because the more and more targets you get, obviously, the lower that efficiency number is going to get. It's just math, right? That's just what happens unless you're just like some kind of freak. So the chemistry with Josh Allen down the stretch last year can't be understated, but this offense is going to be, a spread the wealth type offense. I don't think he's necessarily going to kind of be like a feature alpha wide receiver. However, with that said, we love Khalil Shakir during the pre-draft process. We love that the Bills were able to get him in the 5th round. And man, as you start to go through this draft 2 years later, which is like probably an appropriate time to start revisiting, it's starting to look really good for Brandon
Yeah.
Beane and Khalil Shakir being another key contributor to this team in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it. People will accuse us of like hating or being down on him or this or that. I just truly think that's going to be wide receiver by committee in the year 2024 for the Buffalo Bills, which is going to put a cap on everybody's numbers.
Yep,
So
exactly.
say the 39 catches goes to 50 catches and the 611 yards goes to 800 yards and the 2 touchdowns goes to 4 touchdowns.
That's a good
For a
season.
5th round pick who's just a part of like what would probably be a quality receiver by committee if he puts up those kind of statistics, and Keon Coleman thrives like we hope Keon Coleman thrives, and Dalton Kincaid becomes a top 3 tight end like we expect Dalton Kincaid to become a top 3 tight end, and that 2nd round pick from this year's draft maybe starts putting up some like McCaffrey-esque numbers. If he's just a cog in there and he's putting up solid numbers for a 5th round pick, that's phenomenal. And that is a home run hit. He doesn't have to be an all pro for that to be considered a successful pick.
Yep.
One could argue if Khalil Shakir retires tomorrow, one could argue giving you one season of 39 catches for 611 yards and 2 touchdowns makes it a successful 5th round pick. Like, because that's what you're sort of doing by the time you get to this end of the draft is you're looking for role players. You're looking for guys who maybe they have a big year or 2 on their rookie contract, and that helps you, do certain things and achieve certain goals that you want to achieve. So Khalil Shakir, whether he gets a 2nd contract or not, whether he becomes a all-pro stud type of alpha X receiver or not, the trajectory he's on, totally worth what the Buffalo Bills invested in the 5th round. And if they wouldn't have traded up for Kaiir Elam, I bet they probably would have taken him in the 4th round, and he would have been a good investment in the 4th round too.
Yeah.
On to the 6th round, where this is the problematic pick from this 2022 NFL draft. The Buffalo Bills selected punter Matt Araiza. Who knows what would have happened with Matt Araiza had there not been that whole issue that he had stemming from his time at San Diego State. Round 6 and 7, that's where you take flyers on kickers and punters and return guys and niche players. He's in Kansas City now. He's got a chance to maybe start there and reclaim his NFL career. At the end of the day, this is a miss, but it's also not the end of the world because it's a punter.
Exactly. And like the Bills will have a chance. Like, I mean, they have a ridiculous amount of picks next year. The fact that they have 2 punters on the roster at the moment. Like, I don't think Sam Martin's long for the Bills' future. Like, he's going to be probably gone after this year when his contract's up. His contract is up after this year, right? I think I could be wrong about that. But like you said, the Bills at the time obviously made the best decision they thought they could given the circumstances. We know kind of how things played out with the situation. It was unfortunate. All the stuff surrounding it was pretty, it's a very important topic, and like it's a hot button topic. So the Bills as an organization decided to go a certain way. I hope for Matt Araiza personally that he's able to revive his career given the outcome of sort of how things happened, but it's not the end of the world. And I think the people on social media who are making it out to be like the Bills like lost some Hall of Fame punter, like, you know what, it is what it is. And it's not like, I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Next year, the AFC Championship game, Matt Araiza is going to fake a punt, throw a game-winning tutty, and we're all going to against the Buffalo Bills, and we're all going to lose our mind. On to our next pick in the 6th round, because we had 3 of them. The Buffalo Bills selected Christian Benford. Now, this is really the gem, the diamond in the rough of this Buffalo Bills draft class. He has started 19 of 24 games that he has played in. He's been solid. He's had some injury issues that's kept him out of the lineup. He's missed 10 games over the course of his first 2 seasons, but he really has a chance to take it to the next level in 2024 and become a cornerback 1 on this football team ahead of even a guy like Rasul Douglas. And to me, he's on a trajectory to be maybe like a top 15 to 20, like a solid, John Brown-esque, how John Brown was like a wide receiver 1, like wide receiver one. Christian Benford has a chance to be like the John Brown of CB1s, where he's like probably like the 15th to 20th best corner in the league, but he's your CB1. He's solid. He's dependable. You love him. He contributes. That's what I think Christian Benford has a chance to really become in 2024. And for a 6th-round pick, hell of a steal. Again, another one of those guys where if he doesn't play another down for this football team, he was still worth it for what he contributed his first 2 years as a 6th-round sort of flyer.
Absolutely. We knew coming out, the ball skills were there from him. Villanova, the D2 situation, but had the 7 interceptions, I think, his last season or over his last 2 seasons there. Someone can fact check me on that. But we knew the ball skills were there and the size is there, right? At 6'1", 205. Like, he's got that good size. The knock on him was that he didn't have the top end speed to kind of run down the field with really fast receivers, but the Bills haven't asked him to do that. So he's a good tackler. He's got good ball skills. He is in the mold, I think, of what the Bills ideally and like what they're sort of like, what they can get the best out of skills wise, in as opposed to what they are getting out of Kaiir Elam. Christian Benford, I think, fits stylistically more what they want to do. And you hope he doesn't have a slump right in 2024, because you're really counting on him to be a premium starter for you in 2024. But I don't think that you're going to get a huge drop off in Christian Benford's play in 2024. If you can get that steady contribution like you've been getting from him, like you got in 2023, this really is, as you said, a diamond in the rough pick in the 6th round. And I think if you go back to after the draft when we picked him, like a lot of people, didn't know who he was really until after the Bills made the pick. And as he started like learning about who he was, talked about the ball skills, and then now actually got to see him contribute in a meaningful way. It's another one of those guys where the Bills are like, man, we kind of, I don't want to say lucked into it, but if Kaiir Elam doesn't pan out and Christian Benford as a 6th rounder where there's low expectations doesn't, okay, that's fine, because you didn't really expect something from 6th rounder. That would have made this whole dynamic a little bit more tough to swallow at the CB position.
People have said this before. Like, I know the cover one guys like Greg and Aaron have said this before too. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but it makes me feel better. The pick of Christian Benford cancels out the supposed finger quotes miss of Kaiir Elam, because Christian Benford is producing like a guy that you take in the middle of the end of the 1st round. Like, he really is. Even if Christian Benford is not some Pro Bowler, All Pro, whatever, even if he's just a starting dependable cornerback for this contract and then another contract, that's something that teams would dream about having, taking with the 24th pick in the draft. Just give me 8 years of solid cornerback play. Like, teams would salivate. They would take that at the 24th pick in an instant. So you could argue, I don't like to do it, but you could argue that the Christian Benford pick essentially cancels out the Kaiir Elam pick. I don't like to look at it that way, because all I can think about is what we could have taken with pick 24. But there are other people who will make that argument, and it does make me feel better inside.
It makes me feel better, but I kind of agree with you that it's like, that's not an argument I go to typically when I talk about Christian Benford. It's just like, to me, I kind of separate those two things. I say, you got an awesome player in Christian Benford in the 6th round. You still missed on Kaiir Elam, right? You can't. Yes, you hit on the 6th rounder, but you still missed on your 1st rounder. And to me, missing on the 1st rounder, at least in my mind, I think still holds a little bit more weight than finding this diamond in the rough in the 6th. That's just me personally.
With our final pick of the 6th round, and we still had one in the 7th, the Buffalo Bills selected. This was the pick that you and I hated the most, and it turns out to be the worst pick that the Buffalo Bills made. So all that work we put in the pre-draft process paid off when we were both very dismayed. The Buffalo Bills selected Luke Tenuta, the offensive lineman out of Virginia Tech. He was claimed, so I guess, he did have some value. He was claimed on cut down day by the Colts. He's now a member of the Green Bay Packers. Like I said, we panned the pick. We did not like it, but at the end of the day, it's a 6th-round pick, so it's not like it really matters. But well after Luke Tenuta was taken, Thayer Munford from Ohio State was taken. That's a guy that we talked about as a third or a fourth rounder. When
Yep.
we were doing our pre-draft conversations, we both thought Thayer Munford would be a solid swing tackle type of dude. And turns out, guess what? He's a solid swing tackle type of dude who's played some games in this league for the Raiders and hasn't puked all over himself.
Yep.
And Rasheed Walker was taken after Luke Tenuta as well, who had a far higher athletic ceiling than a Luke Tenuta. So that bugs me a little bit because I was never a fan of this pick. So now 2 years later, I get to vent a little bit here on this podcast. Luke Tenuta, the biggest miss, I think, of this draft, and you can't really even call it a miss because it's a 6th rounder.
Yeah, and I think this is also in the context of us still being in that draft weekend, right? And still trying to justify maybe the Terrel Bernard pick, where we thought the Bills would have taken a guard,
Yeah.
and then the Bills go and take like a tackle late in the draft, and you're like, where's the guard? Like, why didn't you take a guard? And so I do think that the subconsciously maybe there was some panning as well because of the fact that we were still questioning the Terrel Bernard pick. That aside, now looking back at it in retrospect, I still don't like the pick of Luke Tenuta, and I never will have liked the pick. And yeah, let's just move on from that.
In the 7th round, the Buffalo Bills took Baylon Spector, solid special teamer, has flash potential to be a fill-in starter, but can't stay healthy. So as far as 7th round pick goes, if he can get his act together and stay on the field over the course of the next 2 years, pretty solid, right? Like, can't complain about getting that with the last pick of your draft class.
No, I can't complain, and that's the biggest thing for him is the health, right? Because he has shown some flashes, including in the preseason as well. And look, if the Bills can get solid special teams play out of him while he's still on this rookie deal, and they don't have to pay special teams linebacker only type players like they had been paying Tyler Matakevich, and they can just get that out of Baylon Spector, then to me that's a good use of a 7th round pick right there.
And then the Buffalo Bills actually hit on a couple of UDFAs in this draft class as well. Alec Anderson and Kingsley Jonathan, who both made the roster last year, were UDFAs. And I'll tell you what, this one still stings, especially now with the kickoff rules changing in 2024. Raheem Blackshear was a UDFA in that class. He ended up on the Buffalo Bills practice squad that year. He was claimed midway through the year by the Carolina Panthers. He's carved out a nice little niche depth running back / return man role there in Carolina. Obviously, gaining a guy like Ty Johnson has helped ease some of that pain, but it would have been nice if Raheem Blackshear was still part of this backfield because he was a hit as well for Brandon Beane. That was a nice little coup for them as a UDFA as well. So Alec Anderson, Kingsley Jonathan, Raheem Blackshear, 3 UDFAs from this class were active NFL players on a 53-man roster last year.
And certainly expect Anderson to be on the Bills team again this year. Kingsley Jonathan, not sure what his fate might be. I don't probably put it under 50% maybe at this point, but Blackshear, look, I mean, that blow was softened a bit when the Bills went and traded for Nyheim Hines, but then Nyheim Hines had the injury, right? And so that kind of derailed that plan a bit. And so the Bills really have kind of been trying to figure out this sort of return situation since Andre Roberts left the team, right? And we've had guys like Deontay Hardy, we've had Isaiah McKenzie back there, Nyheim Hines was back there. We'll see about this year if it's going to be Daquan Hardy, if it's going to be Ty Johnson, right, who's in the mix again. So look, Blackshear became kind of like a cult favorite during the preseason that year. A lot of people liked him.
It was the summer of Raheem Blackshear and Isaiah Hodgins.
It really was. And then when Carolina picked him up, man, it was like the Bills lost their Hall of Fame quarterback or something. Like people were just like up in arms. What was that dude's name on Antonio Williams? Was that the other running back we had a couple years ago?
He's not even in the league anymore, man.
I mean, Blackshear almost got like the Antonio Williams treatment, like from the fans. Like it was a lot of people liked him, but really what we're talking about is a reflection of the draft class and these UDFAs that the Bills brought in, 3 solid ones that are still kicking around the NFL.
Yeah. 2 years later, every single one of these guys are on an NFL roster, even if it's not the Bills, even some of the UDFAs. So all in all, this was, in my opinion, a home run draft from Brandon Beane. Yes, missed on the punter in the 6th round, and there was all that drama surrounding that. Yes, there's still a massive question mark and a likely strikeout with your 1st round pick, but you have a cornerstone offensive player in James Cook, a cornerstone defensive player in Terrel Bernard, who I think is going to be a high-end auxiliary offensive player in Khalil Shakir, and a solid starter in Christian Benford, plus depth pieces. Like this draft was just full of triples and singles, maybe no home runs. Actually, take it back. Terrel Bernard's probably going to be a freaking home run. Maybe two home runs in James Cook and Terrel Bernard, and a bunch of singles and doubles. Like, that's a freaking great draft.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the different classes Bean has had, and he's obviously gonna, be super like tied to what he did in 2018 when he got Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds in the first round that year. But as of right now, you could make the case, and probably a good case, that 2022 is right there as far as the significance to the Bills here now in this next evolution, as we put it, of this team. The 2018 and the 2022 draft class is probably the most important draft classes that Brandon Bean has had, and the most successful.
And let's hope the 2024 draft class is equally as fruitful as this one was for the Buffalo Bills. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We'll be back on Monday, our regular time, live, 9 p.m. We're going to be setting expectations for the Buffalo Bills defense on Monday. And then on Thursday, we're going to be looking at all the players with expiring contracts on the Bills defense and talk about who we see as part of the Buffalo Bills future and who we don't see as part of the Buffalo Bills future. So expectations, a little crystal ball into the future for the defense next week, offense the week after that. We are in the midst of the off season. There was like a graphic the other day, 100 days to the first football game. Does not make me feel any better.
No,
made me feel worse. Made me feel worse.
100 seems like a lot. So that does not make me feel better.
That is over 3 months. That is over 3 months. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. The best way you can support this podcast is, number one, hitting the like button. Number two, leaving a comment. Both those things help us with the algorithm. But at the end of the day, what would mean the most to us is clicking that share button, copy and pasting the link, and sending it to any friends, family, enemies, if you think they'll hate it, right? Sending it to someone you think would enjoy joining us here at the Air Raid Hour here at Cover One. That sort of organic growth is what we're looking for. We're not trying to trick an algorithm. We're just trying to get people to genuinely join us for this Air Raid Hour experience. So that would mean the most to us. Dave, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is always an interesting time of the off season because there's not necessarily a lot of news, but it is a lot of time for reflection, right? And we do have on Saturday, the June 1st dates coming up. So who knows, like by Monday's show, the cap space coming available, some of that's going to obviously go to the draft picks and signing them. But who knows, maybe there's a move or two that could be happening here in the next week.
I just spoke about organic growth being better than, tricking an algorithm. Maybe our headline for Monday's pod can just be Bills trade for Brandon Ayuk breaking.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what happens.
6 million people tune in to be severely disappointed with what they see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!